traditional rye, right, is the stuff that you guys are growing, and it's typically varieties and open pollinated, and
Mm-hmm.
so maybe a little bit lower yield potential than the hybrid rye. And so hybrid rye then is obviously hybridized, so you have a higher yield potential. The hybrid rye also, this is from KWS, they have said that the hybrid rye has a proprietary gene to increase the pollen volume and decrease the ergot infection.
Welcome to the Crop Science Podcast Show, brought to you by 𝗦𝗽𝗽𝗃𝗃. I am Brian Arnell, and I'm coming to you from the campus of Oklahoma State University. I'm excited to have on with us today Sally Jones-Diamond, Director of the Crop Testing Program at the Department of Soil and Crop Sciences at Colorado State University. Jones-Diamond research is focused on crop production management relevant to the needs of producers in the semi-arid eastern Colorado with special interest in drought-tolerant crops. Her program's mission is to provide unbiased and relevant information to allow producers to make the best management decisions for their farms. Her program runs the official variety trials in Colorado for grain, oilseed, and some of the forage crops, in addition to conducting agronomy and crop input studies in collaboration with commodity groups and industry partners. In her spare time, Sally assists her husband, Jim, with the operation and management of their dry land farm in eastern Colorado. Sally, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So tell us about how you ended up in the position.
So I did my undergrad at CSU. I graduated in the early, 2009. I got my bachelor's, and I took a semester off, worked full-time for Pioneer Hybrid at the time, because I had done some internships with them. And then I decided, I think I want to do grad school. So I just submitted my application. Didn't hear anything for quite some time, and then I applied for a research assistantship with Dr. Jerry Johnson. Got that. That was in the crops testing program, and so he was my advisor for 2.5 years while I got my master's. And then when I had about a semester and a half left of grad school, I said, "Hey, Jerry, I'm going to go look for a full-time job." And he said, "How about you just keep working at crops testing?" That's what I did because it sounded like a good idea. It was fun because I got to work with a bunch of different crops. As much as I liked working at Pioneer, it was a lot of corn, and I'd had enough of just corn. So I was research agronomist for crops testing. That was in 2012. I started that position, and I did that up until 2021 when Jerry retired, and I was promoted to take over, direct the program at that time. So.
Explore the future of agriculture with KWS, a global leader in innovation and sustainable farming practices. Uncover the exceptional qualities of our hybrid rye, cultivating a legacy for a greener tomorrow. Visit kws.com/US for more information and for dealer locations. KWS, seeding the future since 1856.
I can't believe he's been retired since 21. It doesn't quite seem like it's been that long. It might have for you. It might have felt like a million years already for you, but it doesn't seem like he's been retired out of the system that long.
No.
So tell us a little bit about your program. What are you doing in Colorado, and how are you helping the farmers out there?
Yeah, so we're doing the official variety performance trials, which almost every state university has some type of program similar to us. So we do that for the green crops that are mostly in the high plains part of Colorado. We don't do any specialty crops really. And so that's the biggest priority for our program. Then after that, we do the fun stuff, the agronomy trials, one-off stuff. We'll work on new crops that might be of interest to growers out here or companies. So we've dabbled in oil seeds. We work in forages some, and every year it seems like we're trying to expand what we do, and it's really fun actually.
So what range? So for me, I look at it, Colorado is an interesting state as far as it comes to crop production, because I'm assuming the western side, there's a little bit less. So tell us about Colorado and the production systems and where the regions you're working in.
Yeah, so it's pretty diverse. So yeah, Western Colorado has they do sweet corn production. They'll do some beans. They have vineyards, quite a few vineyards, peaches. Right, or at least in my area, the Western Colorado is known for their peaches. So they have high elevation, but they also have these valleys that are they get a lot of heat units in the summers. They can grow some cool stuff. Then obviously the mountains, that's just going to be high elevation forages usually. And then as you get into the Front Range, where Denver, Fort Collins, Pueblo, along there's some vegetable production. So they'll do carrots and cabbage and onions and all sorts of fun stuff like that. And then as you get into the Eastern Plains, then we get into grain crop production. We have some potatoes out here, but most of it's grain and forage. So
is the veggie production, is that there because of Denver and the larger cities, or is it the environment? Because it's an interesting environment for vegetables. The elevation is a little bit higher, but you probably dry and don't have a lot of disease, right?
yeah, so it's very dry where they grow vegetables, but they have water. So there is surface irrigation available. So a lot of the fields are flood irrigated. And so it's just, yeah. And they are close to where their markets are.
So we start talking about your work, and I know you're focused on small grains, but you mentioned that 3-letter word when it comes into stuff. And so, in a wheat state, start talking about rye, and we go a little sideways with some of our producers. Talk about why you're working on rye in Colorado.
Yeah, so rye it's not always it's not always something producers are excited to hear that we're working on. But it's something new, at least in my realm, right? Like I've always heard of it, and it's like, okay, that's off the table because we are a wheat-based cropping system out here.
Yep.
But 𝗽𝗵𝘀𝗀𝗃 here at the USDA station at Akron has been working on it for, probably 7 or 8 years at least. And then I got interested in it a couple years ago. Put in some hybrid rye grain trials, and then in the last couple of years, we've been looking at it from a forage perspective too, comparing it to winter wheat and triticale. And honestly, why I'm so interested in it, especially for grain production, is because we have wheat stem sawfly so bad. And so that has really been a challenge for our wheat producers and our wheat acres here. And so I want something that might be able to help us against wheat stem sawfly and provide the same great residue that wheat does. Rye has more yield potential than wheat, hybrid rye. The residue is excellent, especially if you use a stripper header. So there's just some other benefits to it that I didn't think of initially that are like, okay, this
got a lot of. I'm trying to figure out what direction I want to go next. Let's talk about the wheat stem sawfly and kind of talk about its life cycle and why it's a specific problem.
So wheat stem sawfly has become a really big problem in Colorado over the last 10, 15 years. It's native to Colorado. It wasn't a problem for 100 years, and now it's a problem again. And so it will, in late May usually is when they fly, they will lay eggs in the stems of wheat plants and some other native grasses, and then the larvae will burrow down in the wheat plant, and then they will cut the actual stem. And so then at harvest time, if your wheat is lodged, and your dry land, it's usually from wheat stem sawfly because that stem is no longer attached. So then they overwinter in the leftover residue, and they'll come back out the next year.
So we talk a lot about fly-free dates here in the southern plains. Do you know if that's a similar? I was thinking it was either white fly or sawfly, and I can never remember which.
The management of it is very hard because the only way to control wheat stem sawfly is to till or not grow wheat, resistant or tolerant varieties. I wouldn't resistant, but tolerant varieties right now. Like those are my three main options.
So is that suggesting that, part of the challenge is the increase in no-till acreage and the residue left behind is making it even more challenging?
Yeah, and it's tough because, we're taught, well, there's so many benefits to no-till, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we all know the benefits, but it's also tough because we have this new pest, and so it's like, well, do you want to control the pest using tillage, or do we try some other methods? So we're trying the other methods for the most part. But.
So we see a lot of rye in our state, and we've got rye. It's interesting for me. We have pockets where everybody loves rye, but if you go 20 miles down the road, they're ready to go over war with some if rye's planted. But we put a lot in our sandy regions, maybe acidic, more drought prone soils, and it's interesting. You see the farmers that are historical rye wheat producers have two combines. They have the rye combine and their wheat combine to keep that separated. But one of the things that I guess brought up that kind of piqued my interest in what you said is that for us, we're historically swathing and windrowing the rye and coming back with a pickup header because we have some shatter. We want it to mature. It also gives us a leeway to cut wheat first. So we'll lay our rye down, windrow it, let it dry out, get wheat out of the field, and then come back and pick up rye. You guys are using stripper headers, which makes a ton of sense with that standing stubble. Has that been working pretty well?
Yeah, actually it has. So I'm speaking now from a farmer perspective and not so much a research perspective.
Yeah.
But my husband and I have grown hybrid rye for a few years now on our farm, and we have used the stripper header, and it's worked exceptionally well. It threshes really nicely. The seeds sit in the head like they're gonna shatter, right? Like they're not completely protected like wheat is, but we haven't had an issue with shattering pre-harvest, and we've harvested roughly the same time as our wheat. And so we planted rye specifically because of the residue. We had ground that was sandy and getting some water and wind erosion, and
so maybe that's it, and you have it in here. So I think this is an important time to transition, or not transition, but discuss hybrid versus traditional and feral, because a lot of our acres that we run in Oklahoma are still traditional. We're still Elbon and a lot of that. So talk a little bit about hybrid rye, traditional rye versus feral rye.
Right. So feral rye is like the volunteer rye that you see in wheat fields that nobody wants, right? That's why we have coaxium and clearfield wheat.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, there's definitely pockets of Colorado that still have feral rye as an issue. And so if you're a wheat grower, it's been a challenge. It still is a challenge for a lot of wheat growers. And obviously it's not good to have rye in your wheat. So traditional rye, right, is the stuff that you guys are growing, and it's typically varieties and open pollinated,
Mm-hmm.
and so maybe a little bit lower yield potential than the hybrid rye. And so hybrid rye then is obviously hybridized, so you have a higher yield potential. The hybrid rye also, this is from KWS, they have said that the hybrid rye has a proprietary gene to increase the pollen volume and decrease the ergot infection. If you have,
does hybrid rye get the same height? Because rye is traditionally a taller crop. Does hybrid rye and traditional rye tend to have the same crop height?
Yeah, so the hybrid rye that we've had in the trials and on our farms, I mean, it's very tall. It's 50 to 60 inches tall when you get rain. And we haven't really had an issue with lodging, which has been awesome. The biggest knock that I have is that it's expensive to buy seed, especially compared to wheat.
That makes sense. How's that hybrid rye handling if you compare field by field, comparing looking at drought when it you get hot and dry? How's that hybrid rye handling it versus a wheat crop next door?
I would say pretty similar, if not a little bit better. On this research station, we've been really lucky to have really good rain the past couple of years, so I haven't really got to see it when it's dry. But on our farm, it's done amazing and very, very dry climate.
So now I'm going to go, and I guess this is a farm. Are you getting wheat out of your system going straight rye, or are you into some rotation, rye wheat rotation? What's that look like if you look at a 5-year map of the farm?
Yeah, so if we're growing hybrid rye, we're not going to go right back to wheat for obvious reasons. And so our rotation has been, honestly, we've been mostly spring crops year after year up until about 2 years ago. We started producing more wheat and rye. And part of that was a financial decision because we rent a lot of acres, and when you grow wheat, right, like you're fallowing before wheat, and then you're planting wheat, you lose your income for that year. So we had typically been grain sorghum or corn rotations, and so now with the rye, we can go to grain sorghum next year. We can go to black-eyed peas. We can go to corn. It's easy to control in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
But it depends. We don't have a set rotation. It depends on rainfall. So.
And exactly right. And I think that's an important thing as you look at the audience, that as you get in the semi-regions, it's really hard to plan out 5 years. It's okay, what soil moisture do I have? What depth of moisture do I have? What can I get in the ground? And that's extremely important caveat to farming in the semi-arid regions. How do you, let's say you're going from a rye to one of the beans or something, what's that planting rye? Are you planting into that stripper rye? I'm just seeing a 50-inch tall stubble and putting in a bean, and I'm like, man, that is a tall, lanky bean if it gets out of there.
Yeah, so we are usually by the next spring, all the rye stubble, for the most part, is laid down.
Okay.
And so then it's just a matter of cutting through the stubble, and we don't do any sort of tillage for the most part unless it's an emergency situation. So we just go right into it, and it's been fine.
Are your beans planter beans, or are you running grain drills or air seeders?
We've done both for the black-eyed peas. We've done both, and they've come out just fine. So
when you're doing the beans, I just like equipment too. So when you're running those beans, I guess if you're at the drill, you're just running an easy coulter, but are you dropping the trash sweeps down if you're running a planter on that, or are you leaving those up and leaving as much residue over that? I'm just thinking coverage and the bean get through.
Usually we leave them up just because if you have them down, it can create a lot of problems with that much residue.
Yeah,
it just hasn't been an issue because we're used to dealing with residue anyways. So
that's fantastic. Well, as we transition a little bit more, one of the last topics I want to get is like any other small grains on your horizon that you're looking at as far as CSU or even on the farm?
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to think of like proso millet is something new for the program that we've started doing variety trials on. That proso millet has been a huge crop for Colorado for a number of years, and we just haven't had very many new varieties to test. But since like Dryland Genetics has come into it with some new varieties, we've decided to start testing again. So I'm doing that in collaboration with University of Nebraska-Lincoln, their crops testing program. We're also thinking about doing some spring barley trials next spring.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I mean, we work on winter wheat. Well, that's a huge part of my program. Grain sorghum is a huge part of my program. So
does the millet primarily go to the birdseed industry, or you got a couple good locations for that?
Yeah, we have, even within like 20 miles, we have 2 places that'll take it within 20 miles of Akron,
What's the closest flower? Because I'm assuming they're getting a lot of the sunflower also. Do you guys have much sunflower in the region, or are they trucking that in?
It's hit and miss. There are still sunflower acres, but they've been declining a lot over the last 10, 15 years. But there's still pockets. And so, yeah, the birdseed market is still viable for sunflowers. But
one final question, as you talked about it, what keeps you going in this work, right? What excites you? What's your, why you do what you do, Sally?
Because every day is different. It's like getting to farm with a steady income, and work with so many different crops every day. Like, it's just, I learn something new every day, and I learn from, I just get to talk to such a wide range of people in my job, from farmers to ag industry folks, right, to other researchers. It's just, I want to be a lifelong learner, and so and I'm not always stuck in the office, right? Like, I could go out to the field and do fun stuff and drive equipment and.
Okay, so I lied. I said that was the last question, but now I got another question. How, how does the job influence the farm and the farm influence the job?
The job influences the farm, I think. I mean, I talked to my husband about, we're sharing ideas every week on stuff that might be harebrained, might be a little bit crazy. Sometimes he has a crazy idea, sometimes I do. So I think the job influences the farm because he knows, I am here to be an unbiased source for all farmers, right? He usually listens, not always. His prerogative.
Yeah.
And I would say the the farm influences my job, in that I have such a better understanding of all the different things that farmers are thinking of, what goes into their decisions. Because before I was married to a farmer and before I was involved with our farm, I did not understand half of what went into making what I thought were very simple decisions, right? Of like, oh, this is the wheat variety that you're going to plant. Well, there's 15 reasons why you might plant a certain variety. And I also think the farm influences the job, in that I now think of, what do the farmers want to know? What's important to them? Would I ever recommend something to another grower that I wouldn't recommend for our own farm? And so it just, I think it's really helped me in my job understand better and empathize with other farmers.
A great answer.
It's time for our famous three.
So as we transition to our final questions, what is your go-to work resource?
For sure, especially folks that do crops testing like me. I'm in regular contact with them, whether it's about equipment or agronomic questions. If it's agronomic, I will go to whoever pops into my mind of, like, this person knows this crop really well. Sometimes it's the internet, looking up research papers. Sometimes I will call a farmer that I know has experience.
So I mean, you got a full-time job and a full-time farm. What do you do in your free time? What is a leisure activity that you and your husband enjoy?
Watching Netflix shows. Honestly, because you're so tired at the end of the day.
I get it.
Some of them make you lose brain cells. Some of them are fun. I don't know. In the wintertime, I'll knit a lot right now. That's not something that I really do. But I don't know. Going on tractor dates, that's kind of fun. If Jim's drilling wheat like he is right now, we'll just hang out.
Finally, where do people go to find more about what you're doing at work, more about your program, the CSU variety trials?
Yeah, so it's csukrops.org is our website. We update that weekly during the growing season, if not daily when I'm putting out trial results. Our turnaround time is within a week or two, give or take, for individual trial results. And I have a bunch of other resources on there. So it's not just variety trials, it's production guides, it's, anything else you might want.
Fantastic. Well, now, folks, that's a wrap on another episode of the Crop Science Podcast Show presented by 𝗦𝗽𝗃𝗍. Thanks for joining us today with our guest, Sally Jones-Diamond, Director of the Crops Testing Program, the Department of Soil and Crop Sciences at Colorado State University. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you get a notification every time we drop a new podcast. Share the video if you've learned anything new today. Just share it if you enjoyed it with any of your friends and colleagues. Also, leave us a comment if you want to suggest a new guest or if you have any questions for us. Sally, thank you again so much for joining us today.
Thank you.